Mr. Chairman. General Barr, I'd like to go back to Russia, and your opening statement laid out some of what the GRU had done, what Russian military intelligence had done in terms of hacking. I'd also like to look at some of the oligarchs and some of the corruption so closely aligned with Putin. Volume 1, pages 129 to 144 are largely about Deripaska. Can you tell us who he is and what his objectives are?
I'd rather not get into that in this open setting.
Well, I'll at least quote the Department of Treasury, because this is a public document. So Oleg Deripaska is a designated individual. He possesses a Russian diplomatic passport. He regularly claims to represent the Russian government. He's an aluminum and other metals billionaire, and he's been investigated by the U.S. government and by other of our allies for money laundering. He's been accused of threatening the lives of his business rivals. He's been charged with illegal wiretapping, taking part in extortion and racketeering schemes. He's bribed government officials. He's ordered the murder of a businessman, and he has many links to Russian organized crime. So I think we can, in an open setting, at least agree that he's a bad dude. Right, this is a bottom-feeding scumsucker, and he has absolutely no, I'll take your laugh as agreement, he has absolutely no alignment with the interests of the U.S. people and our public. So the section of Volume 1 that deals with nominally Paul Manafort, but is really about Deripaska, I would like you to help us have an American public 101 understanding of what is and isn't allowed. So Paul Manafort is hired by Deripaska ostensibly for things related to the Ukraine. They have a bunch of failed business ventures together, it looks like, over time. But he's on the payroll of a Russian oligarch that has interests completely misaligned with the American government and the American people and with the interests of NATO. And he's on his payroll. Is it permissible for someone to be paid by somebody who's basically an enemy of the United States, and then could that individual just volunteer and start to donate their time and talent and expertise to a campaign in the U.S.? And I mean this, let me interrupt for a second and say, one of the things that I think is painfully tragic about a hearing like this, I think the vast majority of the American people are going to tune it out, and those that pay attention are going to think the only two takeaways you need to know is a bunch of people were pro-Trump before they came, and they stayed pro-Trump, and a bunch of people were anti-Trump before they came, and they stayed anti-Trump, and we didn't dig into any of what the report actually says. I think these 448 pages say a whole bunch of really important things about intelligence operations against the United States people and our public and our government and our public trust, and I think it isn't just about 2016. There are important questions about 2016. Chairman Graham summarized at the beginning how much money and time was available to the special counsel and his team to do their work. So there are a bunch of factual matters about 2016 that matter. But if one of the most important things we take away from this isn't that we're going to be, it needs to be that we're going to be under attack again in 2020, and it isn't just going to be Russia, who's pretty dang clunky at this stuff, but it's also over time likely going to be China, who's going to be much more sophisticated about this stuff. Can you help us understand what is legal and illegal about foreign intelligence services being involved in U.S. elections, and what should American people and the American public, and especially American campaign operatives, know about what's appropriate and not appropriate to take in the form of help from foreign intelligence agencies?
I mean, that's a very broad topic. What is legal and illegal? I mean, could you refine it a little bit? You're talking about what kind of propaganda, that kind of thing, coming into the country? You can't put money into a foreign money, obviously, into a campaign.
Yeah, but could Russia, China, I'm making up a country, decide to come into the United States and look at all the political talent, make a database? By the way, the OPM hack in 2014 tells us the Chinese government is actively involved in creating databases of people they can potentially use as leverage against American citizens. More than 20 million people are already in the spy recruitment database of the Communist Party of China. Could they come in and build a database of all campaign operatives in the U.S. and some foreign entity just decide to hire all of them and then say, why don't you go and volunteer for this campaign and you go and volunteer for that campaign? Could we have campaign chairmen and women running around the U.S., U.S. citizens who have U.S. campaign talent and experience paid for by foreign entities just choosing to volunteer on campaigns going forward? Is that legal?
If their time is paid for the purpose of participating in a campaign, I wouldn't think it's legal.
But given how sleazy so much of this city is, and a whole bunch of people live on retainers of $15,000 and $20,000 and $30,000 a month, is it always obvious what you're paid for versus what you do? So some Russian oligarch just decides to start putting American campaign personnel on retainer payments and say, we may need you to lobby for something somewhere in the future. They've got views about oil pipelines and natural gas pipelines into Germany. We just hold you on retainer. And by the way, the fact that you're a person who likes to work for specific campaigns and certain parties and causes, feel free to go and avocationally do whatever the heck you want whenever you want. Is that a place we should head? Is that allowed under U.S. law today?
Well, I mean, it depends on the specific circumstances, the nature of the agreement, who the person is representing. Are they representing the interests of a foreign government? Are they a foreign agent? Are they registered? I mean, it's a slippery area, and we could sit here all day and without specific.
I only have 7 minutes. I don't get all day, but you're the chief law enforcement officer of the United States government, and I think it would be helpful for us to have a shared understanding as we head toward the 2020 election of what campaign operatives should well understand is beyond the pale. So if the Chinese government decides to start hacking into 2020 campaigns, I would hope there's clarity from the Department of Justice about whether or not Democratic presidential campaigns and whether or not the Trump re-election campaign are allowed to say, hey, we're interested in this hacked material going forward. I think we need to have clarity about a question like that. And I think as somebody who sits not just on Judiciary, but on the Intelligence Committee, I think there are a bunch of counterintelligence investigations happening right now in the United States where campaigns don't really understand what the laws are. And I think we need a lot more clarity about it. Because I'm nearly at time, let me at least give it to you as this version as a precise question. Under the Presidential Transitions Act, once you have a Democratic nominee for president and a Republican nominee for president, one of the things that we do is we start to brief them on, in the event that you would become the president-elect, you will need to know where we are in different national security issues. Should we be adding to the Presidential Transition Act counterintelligence briefings for campaigns as they become the nominee in a much more detailed way than the response you had about the Bureau's efforts when Senator Cornyn asked if defensive briefings were given? Should we, the Congress, be thinking very intentionally about authorizing the ability of the Bureau, and in a shared broader IC context, but with the Bureau or Homeland Security probably being the interface entity, should nominees for the highest office in the land heading into 2020 be receiving regular counterintelligence briefings on the fact that foreign intelligence services are going to surround people that are likely going to be people of influence and principal officers of the United States government should they win?
Absolutely. I think the danger from countries like China, Russia, and so forth is far more insidious than it has been in the past because of non-traditional collectors that they have operating in the United States. And I think most people are unaware of how pervasive it is and what the risk level is. And I think it actually should go far beyond even campaigns. More people involved in government have to be educated on this.
Thank you. I'm at time, but I would love to work with you in the broader intelligence community on that more. I think there are a number of members of the SISI, of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who know what you're saying, particularly about the Chinese government and their attempt to encircle lots of people who are going to have influence in the future. And I think we, not just a whole of government effort, but as a whole of society effort, have to become much more sophisticated about what foreign intelligence services, and especially the Chinese, are plotting for the future.
Yeah, if I could just say that, the pattern is whenever there is an election, foreign governments and their operatives frequently descend on the people who they think could have a shot at winning, and it's common. And the most typical scenario is that they do try to make contacts and so forth. So.
And in a digital cyber era, you don't need a bar and a hooker anymore. You can surround people digitally much easier, and we know that we're going to be having these kinds of attacks in the future, and we need to up our game. Thanks.
Minus the bar and the hooker, we'll have hearings about all this stuff.